September 23. If we could have, please, the roll call
Miss Adams,
here.
Mr. Venicola,
Here.
Mr. Tomasco,
Here.
Miss Wagner, and Mr. Weiss had indicated they will not be here, but we do have a quorum.
Okay, excellent. Okay. So could we please pause for a moment of silence and then we'll stand for Pledge of Allegiance? Okay. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Thank you. All right. So, I'd like to make a motion to consider approving the agenda from last meeting August.
Motion.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Right. We do have some members of the public. Do we have any public comments on any of the agenda items? You'll have an opportunity to provide public comments on anything else a little later, but if it's just on the items that are here in the agenda. Okay, all right. Well, then we'll have opportunity in order to talk about that. All right, thank you. Okay. I would like actually, I did this in reverse. I'm sorry. With our last motions, can we correct that? That was for approving the agenda. And then this is the the motion to approve the minutes from the August 24th, 2023 meeting. Have a second?
Motion.
All right. And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, fantastic. All right, we're moving on to reports from the Township Arborist. What you got, John?
Yeah, nothing.
Drexel. Okay, fantastic. That's good news. Okay, all right, thank you. The agenda, are there copies of the agenda, Heather? Are they in the back there? If you want to get the agenda, it's in the back there. All right. Okay, so we're going to move on to the land development review and the discussion and possible action on the application for 3111 Sawmill Road. John, did you want to start with your comment letter?
But I know that they talked a little while back, there was gonna be some. Yeah, sorry, yeah. Is it in here?
Yeah. And can you please state your name and address, please? Yeah.
We had some. So you have not. Okay, well, that makes. And everything was engineered. So I involved in engineer. So I know, yeah, I did the whole walk too. Quite long. Never. Little rundown here, talk about what they're taking out, their for management and system, all that good stuff. Read that. Activities that might. And I'd like to see it.
I do. So there's, in addition to what John said, we need a figure showing all the trees and vegetation. So it says, and this is in chapter 104-11A of the Land Development Code, that this plan shall, so the existing conditions and preservation inventory, and shall include a preservation inventory, including all special plants and other plants to be protected on the site. It also talks about identifying all the trees that are existing as well. So I would ask that you take a look at that chapter of the ordinance as well, because we need that information. And when you were doing your calculations for your trees that were to be removed, what areas did that include? Was that all construction areas, including the homes, the retention areas, the pipelines, driveways, everything, or what did that number include?
I don't think they,
Okay,
that's what we thought we did. Nothing on the driveway sign. Up, down, up, down. Hopefully. Get the driveway back to the full connector.
One second, you need to go to the
Yeah.
podium and state your name.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I am Shade Tree, certified arborist. Here. I did a whole walk around and assessed the property. Went back and forth with John, I went and assessed all trees on the driveway for these. All been popped down to about like 12 feet. Fucking box elders that are hollowed out. I mean, there's nothing.
I'm not questioning that. So when we do our evaluation, we're responsible for evaluating the impacts to all the trees related to the construction of the project. So that could include installation of the pipelines, the installation of the retention, the new sewer and water lines, which we saw in the engineer's report. And so what I'm just asking is that when you're doing your plan and that revised plan, that it needs to include an assessment of all the trees, that we need to see what trees are there. Okay. Okay, and where those, because we'll be looking at where those pipelines and things go, or where the retention is. And so we're just asking to please include that in your assessment of the impacts.
Any tree in the,
Just identify what they are, just like what John said, identify what they are, and if they're.
Yeah, right, then I'm doing it, it's fine, yeah, everything else, that's fine, yeah. It's not on the plan. We need the plan. All those. So I'm gonna say gas tree. Okay, yeah, that's fine, he'll do that, but like we're. So. People are gonna be. Have. Other improvements inside. Not even that. You've done your homework, you've done a great job, it just needs to get transferred to. Once we have that, then we'll be able to come back with. How to move this tree from here, this tree is good, it's not good. And that final. Can be done, hasn't done this.
Okay. All right, so discussion, do you guys have any?
No, it's early. They're both.
Okay.
You
Alright.
have to present it.
Okay. Okay. All right. Right, new business. I don't think we have any. Old business, the tree inventory. Were we gonna try and do that today? Okay. 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 All right, well then we will postpone that. And, all right, so let's move on to discussion on the draft shade tree ordinance. So what are your all's thoughts?
Needs work. Some things I don't agree with on it. The tree calculations for replacement. I don't know if we can separate it from land development. But if someone takes a tree down in the front of their house, I don't think, like, if it's a big tree and it's dying and it's diseased or whatever and has to come down, I don't think they should have to put 6 or 8 trees in for that one tree. You know, I just don't see it. I mean, I know down like in Springfield or whatever, I could see every so many feet you have to have a shade tree. I mean, basically Springfield does. It's like 1 for 1. They want you to replace. And if you already have one there, they're pretty much lenient. If you have another large shade tree in the front of your house, they're not making it. They want 1 shade tree in the front of the house, you know, I mean, that's something like that. And then I think this ordinance is talking towards the right of way. Basically,
Is it specific to the right of way, Andy? Is this or is this revised ordinance specific to trees just in the right of way? Or is it just on, because I don't read it that way, but
I think it's specific to simply shade trees as is defined,
mhm.
and the trees that are on public land. I don't see, and I didn't go through, I didn't get an opportunity to read everything, but I know that section 158-10 changed significantly.
Well,
That
it's,
was the section that dealt with land development in the prior, in the current ordinance. So the concern that I had in my brief reading through it was we're excluding all private land. The proposed ordinance is kind of telling me that private property is out of bounds. And
Let me just jump in 1 second. So sure, Chris, the last meeting, I was not here. Right? This we're on seeing, what did he explain about the private property?
well, I thought that included the street trees. You know, that we would still have control over street trees within the right of way or whatever it
I think
is.
that's what we have to.
And so, but, and then it was my understanding that even though 58-10 was completely revised, my understanding from our meeting that Rich was going to come back with something else, that we were going to do the street trees and public trees first, and then he was going to figure out how to handle land development. That was my understanding.
I mean, I heard you loud and clear at our meeting that land development was important to keep a hold of, and I thought that he agreed with that.
Right, and
And
so
so
that's
I don't-
why I think I mean, we'll have to ask Rich, but I think we're expecting to see that later. Either I thought he was gonna put it in
Well, I think-
land
I
development or
don't-
something.
I'm not quite sure I understand why we would delay land development, because obviously we're involved in land development review, and I think it's an important part of what your primary goals are going to be, because if you read the shade tree definition says any tree fully or partially within the ultimate right of way along a public street or highway excluding state highways. For the purpose of this chapter, the term shade tree shall include the following: any tree with any part of its strip line or root system within the ultimate right of way along a public street or highway.
Mhm.
I think that is consistent with the state code for second class township. That we can create a shade tree committee that enforces trees along state, our roadways. And then it goes on to say, any tree required to be planted along a private street as a shade tree pursuant to a land development plan. So land development is referenced under our definition. I don't quite see that in the same context as we currently have. So 158.10, I think, was changed significantly because, and it may just be a relocation issue because of other amended sections. But if you go to 158.10, that just simply speaks, it's a very short paragraph now, and speaks solely to prohibitive activities.
Right. And that, yeah, so, I mean, the thing that has, so if you look at the definition of diseased or dangerous trees or bushes. I don't understand why we're
I
regulating
find that difficult too.
bushes.
I
But-
find that difficult
but-
too,
but-
because here again, I think it intermixes. If the goal and in the scope of this ordinance is to provide you the authority to review and advise on the replacement of trees taken down as part of the land development project, number one. And number two, address all shade trees along the roadways.
Mhm.
That's, and on
And
public
public,
property. and on
yeah.
public. So I think there's three components.
Yes,
I think this section on diseased trees is confusing to me as the code enforcement officer,
yes,
because I read it to again say, it says any property.
exactly.
Well,
So
it
that's
says
where I
any
was
property,
confused.
That opens itself up to
Private.
private properties.
So,
or
so,
properties that are owned by HOAs. Now, I think here again, that becomes somewhat convoluted because I think the HOA, if there was a land development plan that HOA was created under,
Mhm.
and it included a landscaping plan that identifies tree replacement that fell under your jurisdiction, I think that those trees are applicable for us to enforce and to make sure they're there. I heard you in the meeting fairly clearly to say, again, going back to the Stony Knoll project, where they took the path to locate required trees on private property. I don't see that identified.
no,
So,
so I guess, let's start from the very beginning. What I don't find clear is the purpose of the ordinance. And I
well, that's
think,
important for us to make clear.
yeah,
Because
and
if we
so,
start off with the wrong foot on the purpose,
well,
then we're.
if we're confused over it, then clearly the public is going to be confused. So
When you met with Rich the one day, remember it was like a last minute, what came out of that meeting?
my understanding, well, there would be a total rewrite of the ordinance because Rich believed, and I don't want to speak for him, but it was my interpretation that he believed that the current ordinance as written isn't compliant for a class 2 township. And we didn't have the authority to regulate private lands as the ordinance suggested.
We
So,
did not. Right, that's what I heard you say, we did not.
right,
Yeah, right.
we did not. And so his goal was to rewrite the ordinance in compliance with a class 2 and with state law and to align with other shade tree ordinances and roles of other shade tree commissions that I guess through his experience that he was going to write it in that way. And again, and maybe I'm wrong, but I thought he said that the land development aspect of it was trickier and he had to do more work on it. And that the rewrite as of now would include just kind of defining the role of the commission and showing that we had and then dealing with the public trees and the shade trees within, the street trees. so that it would define that. So that's what I kind of see in here, because, and I really thought he said that the, that land development would be coming in
But
later.
I think the whole point, and you may be right, I may have certainly misheard,
I could have missed
but
her.
I did not understand that coming out of that meeting, that land development section
Mhm.
that fell under your scope was going to come later. I did not understand that. So
I mean, was your
mean,
impression?
whether or not we agree on that point, I think it's important for us to focus our comments this evening on what needs to happen with this ordinance. And
Mhm.
personally, I think that the land development aspect has to be written into this, so we're done with it
Mhm.
and we can act accordingly.
Right.
But everyone knows their scope, everyone knows it doesn't make sense to me, and here again, I'll defer to the powers to be, but it doesn't make sense to me to adopt half an ordinance.
I agree. So I wasn't sure if he was just giving this to us, just this part, and then the other part would follow. I
Yeah,
just don't
and that's
know.
what I'm saying.
And I mean,
don't
you could
think
be
we should-
right.
I don't think we should disagree on that. I think we should focus on
Mhm.
what do you want to see, or what do you think is missing in this ordinance? And my opinion is the land development aspect.
Mhm.
I would simply make and I mean, John, I don't know if you agree, but I mean, the whole replacement tree concept, as you went through with Mr. Pereira.
Yeah.
Was for that reason, to identify the trees that are on a property in an existing condition. Identify those that will be subject to
Right.
that construction. And then apply the replacement values that are in it.
Right, but
So,
before,
there are three simple aspects of it.
So why don't we do, sorry to interrupt you, Rob. Why don't we do this? Now, this has been going on for years now, I believe. Why don't we set up an executive decision meeting with us and sit down with them, take the old ordinance, take this ordinance, sit down and match them up, talk about our wish list, which knows the rules, second class. We ask for X, he's gonna say yes or no.
Well,
Combine.
I just think that in doing that, I don't know how quickly that can happen. So,
Yeah.
and here again, it's just a suggestion coming from a staff person
Yep.
who sits with this committee. I would go through the ordinance line by line as a committee. Whether you do it here this evening, or whether you talk amongst yourselves via email, you share your own changes.
Yeah, but we're not allowed to do
But I
that.
was.
We're not allowed to do that because of sunshine. So it has to
Well,
be.
if
in a-
you're doing it as an individual,
And you're sending.
and you're trying
So-
to,
All right, so
But
that's
so-
what I would need is each one of the committee or commissioners to send their comments to me. I can collate them.
I think we should,
Okay,
all of us together,
all right.
okay? Put our heads together. Heather. Copy of our comment.
that's it.
Let them review them themselves. Let Andy, being code, take a look and maybe make some suggestions. Okay,
And I'm just going to review it, like, as I started this,
Mhm.
from
I like,
how can we enforce it? Is this
Right.
enforceable? I'm just coming at it from that. I have no, responsibility in overriding you folks and what your wants and needs are in this ordinance. I'm simply going to look at the comments to say, can we logistically enforce this?
Well,
Right?
and I agree, and I'm totally on board with you on
So-
that because I like this part about the diseased and dangerous trees or bushes on on any property, public or private. That to me, if that goes, it conflicts with the direction that Rich was going. That's like, look, you got private property hands off.
Right.
But so it gives us the authority to regulate dead trees and to force people to
Well,
cut them down.
Well, and that's the other thing. I think that creates more burden on John, because
I think it's a
as-
liability for
but
us.
as an enforcement individual.
Well,
If I'm gonna get a call, our office is gonna get a call. There's a dead tree on the property. What we currently say is that's a private property matter that has to be handled because we have nothing on the books currently that speaks to an issue like that we can enforce. Okay, so by putting this in this ordinance, we could, but it's not shade tree. So the whole title is Shade Tree Ordinance, right? And now we're involving what may be a visual impairment to a site or to a right of way, things like that are not created by a shade tree.
Right,
So I think that my suggestion in adding to this ordinance would be put that somewhere else in our property maintenance code. Separate from the tree ordinance.
right.
Right? And that way it gives us the ability to still enforce something, but simply through my office and not bringing it to you folks to say, hey, it's an obstruction.
Right, so
Or-
did you read my comments on the ordinance, Andy? Did you
I
get a chance?
mean, I'll be honest with you,
So-
I have not.
So,
I did not, if I can make a comment, I was very confused when I got Rich's. Said, hey, take a look at this, because you met with him.
right,
And then we got this copy. So I figured everything that was in that copy was everything that you guys discussed.
no, yeah.
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
you met, and then there was a copy, so.
Right.
Simultaneously, it came out,
So,
I figured it
Quite
was
frankly,
resolved by what
No,
you wanted,
sorry.
and we talked, and you're like, that's not what I want.
Right.
So if we sit down and we redline it, get it over to them, get it over to Rich, let Rich come back to us with comments. I think with one more revision.
Yeah, and I really think that whatever, and here again, if you can track it in Word, we can send you, this is a Word document, if you don't already
I
have it.
provided,
You can cut.
track
the
changes.
trace of what the text, and just, you're not changing what's here. You're inserting a suggestion to the text.
right.
And you'll highlight it in red, you keep track, that's all tracked through a Word document, you all know how to do that
Yeah,
probably
track
better than I.
changes.
And we would send that as the committee's
all right,
suggested recommendation to modify the current draft. And then I think Rich's sole responsibility at that point is to say whether or not your comments have any legal, if there's any legal issues that come up with those comments. And if the answer to that is no, I think that that track document
mhm,
should then go to the board.
Okay.
And ultimately, they're going to be the body that adopts this ordinance, and they're going to either accept or not accept those track changes based upon everyone's input.
I read into this, it's right away. Land development is preset already. Like he's in here already, those trees already had to be marked and they didn't comply to it. So that us being put into our ordinance, it's double. So land development's land development. Should we have to review the land development
But
plan to make sure? Is currently written, a land development plan is currently written. Because I know when I built my house back in 91, I had to list every single tree on the property, what was being removed and everything. So that hasn't changed.
but that's.
But
in-
putting it in our ordinance double doesn't do anything. Should we review that? Like John says, well, I'd like to have different species of trees. That's where we should come in on the land development plan. Not
Yeah.
as in changing the whole land development plan.
Right, there is separate chapters in
Yeah.
our township code.
Yeah.
So chapter 148 is land development. When I've looked through that chapter, I don't specifically see where a landscaping plan that would comply with this is a requirement of a preliminary final plan. So I think that this is not in addition to, it's supplemental to.
Right,
So
it builds, it's a step
Okay.
down.
All right.
It's a
So-
step down from it, and plus, and also 104. I mean, currently our ordinance says that we have to make sure that we're consistent with 104 as well. And that information is provided. So I think you're absolutely right. So you have land development, which is the bigger, kind of more general, and then you're narrowing it down to what we need specifically for trees, and that's what
Yeah,
our
and-
ordinance
And
does.
I think the land development code, I don't like where, when codes are written and ordinances written. I like when they cross-reference one another. They don't have to reiterate it,
Right.
but they have to point developers to it.
Right.
So a developer who comes in, like Mr. Pereira, normally his engineer is going to review zoning and land development. Right? And they may look at the street ordinance and things like that. So those 2 or 3 chapters they're going to look at. So when they look at our land development chapter 148, there should be in the criteria, it should be compliance with chapter 158. It shouldn't rewrite 158. It should point people to chapter 158. And then it triggers their review of that chapter so they understand when they produce a plan what's expected. So hopefully you're limiting your review time, because it's a lot of time spent on the developer's behalf and a lot of money on his behalf to come back with different plan revisions. So the goal is to get it to them to do it one time.
Yes,
By just citing each chapter and each.
right,
Yeah.
so they're aware, so I don't. I don't disagree with that. So, I like your idea, John. Is it possible, Heather, to
Let's
schedule?
plan it right now. Let's set it up for the.
We
agenda.
can't we need these 2 though.
Oh, you mean for a.
I mean, I just want to, if we wanted to set a date, I don't
Well,
know.
Carol's
whether-
on vacation, so-
I mean, we could still.
Okay.
We don't have to have her, we just need 3.
Yeah, I know, exactly.
I'm not-
I mean, Carol will be here.
No, I mean, I'm not saying for quorum or something like that. I'm saying for our,
Your meeting. I would suggest too.
I was just gonna,
Here again, to look through it, make your own individual notes
And bring them to that.
and bring them to that meeting. And if we have to, I guess if we had to advertise it, I'm not up on the sunshine laws. I mean, I know. a little
I
bit
think it
about
has to be
Obviously,
advertised.
if we need to advertise it,
Yeah.
we'll need to get it advertised.
yes,
But I think it's an important enough topic that you as a group have to submit one set of comments
right.
for further consideration
Mhm.
before this ordinance is reviewed and
So
adopted.
my recommendation for that is, why don't we, I'm not sure. You guys can get here at 4:00. Spend an hour going through our comments. Have our meeting, get through whoever's your application or whatever, get them out the door. Remaining time is going through, you can have your laptop, you can make track changes while we're all talking. I'll copy to everybody that has me
Mhm.
review it. Final changes, get it back to Trish. That'll go to you.
Mhm. That's fine. So
Let's-
I'm
I think
probably,
that makes a lot of sense.
yeah,
Let's do it now.
I mean-
4:00 October meeting.
we don't want to try and do it before that.
It just because we're gonna need more time. Obviously, Tom works full-time, Rob works part-time.
I'm gonna be off. I'm gonna have a free vacation.
Heather working full-time and overtime, I'm working full-time,
Yeah.
Rob's still part-time. And then, I'll kid, Rob's going to. That way, between 4 and 5, we can get a lot of stuff accomplished, the big. Hone it down after everybody leaves, the 5:00 meeting, okay, and then that has us till 7 until planning starts. You have that time to wrap it up, get it done and get it. Make it happen, and get it.
Okay.
done.
Yeah, because I think that helps Rich
Mhm.
to simply understand your comments as a committee. He can take a look at those simply the track changes. And in his mind, no, well, this is legal, this is not legal, they may be an issue for one reason or another. And prepare that in a way to have that conversation with the board. Now, I don't know if. Well, I guess what we'll have to do is see what his response is from that track change to determine whether or not you want another crack at it. In my mind, if it's minor in nature, let it go before the board and come to that meeting as a representative of the Shade Tree Committee so you can participate.
Mhm.
I mean, Rich is only gonna tell us no.
Right, well,
Doesn't care
Well-
about shade tree. Gonna tell us whether or not we can. So if it's good and solid, he might even go and we can send him a sidebar note and say, hey, even if our wording not legal, can you change illegal so that we can still accomplish our goal? They'll do that. I mean, work for us.
And for an example, I mean, just as we talked about the on any property, you know, I particularly, I highlighted that and I said, in my mind, that's a question. I think you can do the same, a similar thing and say, you've done this before and tracked it all on the side with your comments. And said, why is this in here as the committee? We don't want to be dealing with bushes and things on, I thought it was only on public property.
well, in fact, my comment said, isn't this code enforcement's responsibility? Because why are we regulating line of sight?
I agree.
I mean, so,
In my opinion, that's a great comment. Should be in this ordinance. It should be elsewhere.
so I mean, okay, I mean, that's fine. I mean, the whole reason why I just went through this and provided this to these guys is just give a sense of where I was coming
Sure.
from and to get, and what I would have liked to see out of this meeting is just today was just if you guys had a chance to look at it, my comments, if you had concerns, if you agreed or disagreed with some aspect of it, or just to get a sense, because I don't, my whole, I still don't have a clear understanding of what the township's intent is and what the expected outcome of this ordinance is, because it seems that the original ordinance was pretty clear on that, and this isn't
But I think as
clear.
we're finding out, I think that was far too broad and beyond the scope of what the second class, so maybe
Well,
it
I
would
know
be
that,
helpful.
I know that, but I mean, the overall purpose of it is still good. I mean, it was because it's protect the tree canopy within the township. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And that is a good goal.
Right.
You know, and then also recognizing the importance of trees and the value that they provide to help ameliorate things such as stormwater runoff.
But I will say from what I heard in our meeting was that's beyond the scope, that's permissible of the Shade Tree Committee as defined by the second class township code. So
Yeah.
that's what I heard Rich say. And that's why I'm saying, I think the scope is going to be narrow. And I think it's going to be clearly narrowed to speak directly to shade trees along township roadways, on public land, and on land development
But
projects.
why are we doing that? Why are we doing that? Because we're recognizing the value. No, because we're doing that to recognize the value
Oh, I
of
agree.
trees.
Yeah,
So that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about regulating Mrs. Smith's,
Right,
you know,
right.
tree in her backyard. I'm
And
not
that's-
talking about that.
I think that,
Okay, I mean, but if there's an overall goal for the township and maybe, and the thing that we did talk about last meeting with Rich was, or with Stephen Neese rather, was that there are opportunities if the township's goal really is to maintain and preserve tree canopy. You're right. It probably, we can't do it through the Shade Tree Ordinance because of those reasons. But there are other ways that you can do it, either protected trees, either as part of the stormwater management, because you're going to say that cutting down trees is a bad thing because it's going to, and that isn't our purview. I'm not saying that, okay? But that is an avenue for protection, furthering the mission or the goal to protect shade trees because of the value, or trees in general, because of this ecosystem service that they provide.
Right.
There are other ways in other parts of the ordinances, either through land development, which is probably the right place for that.
Right.
But that's where it would need to be. So if we can't regulate those things under shade tree, which I get, there's other places that you can, and I don't know if the township is interested in doing that or what their
But
goal
I think that's a
is.
separate subject,
Mhm.
apart from what we're currently looking to do. So there was a current ordinance that was written that we're working under that doesn't work. And there's a lot of confusion as a result. As a result of that, the committee said, we need to revise this ordinance. Okay? Rich looked at that and realized the scope was too broad. And that's what this revision does. It's narrowing it down to what
Sure.
he feels is legally bound by your
I get that.
committee to enforce under the second-class township code and whatever legal
I completely
matter
understand.
he's reviewing. So I admire the goal and I think but I think we have to look at this as a incremental step-by-step approach to getting something done. I think the first step would be to get the ordinance right. And to get it worded the way you want it to be worded as best we can. Take that step, complete it, and we can move on to the next step, as you suggest. But I think by conflating the two, it's going to prolong everything.
I'm just trying to understand what,
Understood.
What
I
they-
I
what
completely
they want.
understand your position. I do.
so. Okay, so, all right, so we'll meet. So can you guys please review it and provide track change versions and then bring those to the meeting next month?
We're gonna meet at the meeting to discuss.
We're gonna meet, they don't need to bring a chapter. We're gonna have you as our
Scribe,
moderator. We're gonna give you our feedback. Of what we have read, I mean, Rob and Tom, give you, they like to see, they're gonna pen their version.
well, that's what I mean.
And they'll give you, we'll make one set of track changes.
No, I understand that, but I am not gonna be able to make all those changes within and write it up. Okay, within that hour. That's hard.
That's what I'm saying, we're gonna have the hour.
No, I understand, but if they can bring their copy with their changes to how they want it written, it's gonna be helpful for me to bring that together into one document without me having to do it on the fly and missing something, because I'm gonna be trying to listen, participate, and scribe, which is virtually impossible to do.
I've read penning it up, not doing track changes. Rob, do you do track changes on?
I don't care. If you want to write it on your piece on a hard
Rob and
copy,
I are-
I just need something from you, so I understand where you're coming from, and if I have questions to clarify what you meant, then.
I'm sorry, isn't that the point of the meeting? The 4 o'clock meeting, we're gonna bring our discussion at that meeting.
She just wants it written down so she can
But-
input it.
but why would I write it down and give it to you when they may just toss the whole thing right out at the point of the meeting? Right, so there's nothing to bring to you yet. We're gonna decide what we're gonna do at that meeting and then give it to you, right?
Well,
Yeah, I think.
she's saying she
we'll
just
talk
wants to
about
know,
coming
write it
prepared
down
to
so
the
it's
meeting
written
course.
that she.
With your thoughts.
Yes.
So one document could be produced.
Right.
And doesn't mean it has to be produced that evening, but you should meet to discuss comments in
Right.
order to bring it together as one
So
document.
Tom, just go through it, there's something that really stands out.
Exactly.
Outline
Just got it.
it So that.
Absolutely.
So we don't-
Capture
Yeah.
your main objective of what you want to say.
And I would just be hyper-focused on consistency. I mean, I think that that's what makes a good ordinance, is when it's consistent.
Yeah.
When there's a clear scope, and if you feel that the scope is unclear, I think that you should say, we need scope to be, read this, like this. There should be a scope, and this is what it should say. I think that that's a reasonable recommendation for the draft. And then I would go through and highlight any of the definitions that are inconsistent with the scope. And then, so I don't know that you, I mean, I would go through it line by line, but as you're reading it, develop a thought about something. And that's why when we started the meeting, my main focus was, I don't see land development in here. And I understood that was a primary goal. And then I said, I thought that private property was not under your scope, but yet we reference any property. Things like that, I think, are important, where it's not,
Well, that's
you're
what,
not picking apart every sentence, but you're developing a clear understanding of the ordinance.
what I would appreciate. Is if, because you don't do Word. I provided, could you give me your comments in my version that and just put, when you save it, just put your initials at
Oh, I
the
like
end
it
of the
yellow.
file. So that I know that that's your, and then that way I can follow and track either. And let me know if you agree with a comment or if you want to respond to it, or if you agree, disagree, have other things. If you could do it in that version, that would be ideal for me. That will help me. So I don't have to do a ton of work. All right.
To be honest with you, Heather and I were kind of prepared to go through it tonight and say, you have this, that, and the other thing, and we were gonna do that. But I don't think everybody's up to that. I think that we're not clear on the complete reading of it.
Well, there's a lot missing, and the thing that really threw me was this added part about the diseased or dangerous trees or bushes, because to me, that completely undermined what I thought the scope was, which was to limit it to public trees and street
Yeah.
trees. And then so to me, where there was a disconnect was when I'm reading through it, it's unclear to me why we would be allowed to dictate what a person can do and require somebody to cut down a tree, but we can't do anything to preserve them. That was my,
That's where I got confused, where I saw it in there and you had a meeting with Rich.
Right.
And I thought that got. put
this
back
was
in.
not even that this,
I understand, but that's where the confusion all. over the
Yeah,
place.
yes, and I understand how that happened.
Yeah,
too.
so
And just so you know, I mean, I also wanted to share it with George Sharris because he's recognized in this ordinance very clearly. So I would suspect that George may also have some comments at some point down the line. You know, if it's impactful to your committee, I'm sure he would share that.
sure,
But here again, I see it as you have different reviewing agencies in any municipality. And I think it's just important that Shade Tree Committee, these are the track changes for you folks. And if the Public Works Director has proposed changes, that should be tracked. And then it should all come together under Rich's final draft.
right. That's fine. Yeah, and I mean, and to your point about land development, it didn't seem to me that there was any, so we have the tree replacement formula, but there was no trees. He's like, I didn't understand any of that, so I wasn't sure where that was coming. But Andy, if you have, I know you're super busy, but if you have a chance to look at my comments.
Yeah.
And if you have any concerns, please shoot me an email and, maybe we can chat. But I would like that. And to your point on George, I was confused as well because it talked about the Public Works Director. And then, so my question was, so wait a minute, so is Andy no longer going to be our point of contact? And it's back to, because remember, we were flip-flopping a lot early on, so,
but everything that I do in the township, Bob George.
right,
So it makes sense to me.
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
So, and I mean, and that's fine, but then again, that's where there's that combined role of what we do for the public and the street trees protection versus when we're doing our review under land development, which was then more fall into your
Right,
bailiwick. And then this whole thing about regulating bushes just threw me
which
completely.
also falls to the code enforcement part.
Exactly,
I mean,
so,
there is
yeah,
definitely, George's duties and my duties are always overlapping in
sure,
a lot of ways. So, whether he's here or I'm here, I mean, I think we interchange enough with other committees as well. We do try to communicate, so I don't think we have to worry about that. But like you, I wanted to I want to know too.
I was just confused.
I just want to make sure, Heather, how far in advance do the applicants come?
They have to have, I need 30 days,
Soon for the next meeting.
so there is nothing for the next week.
Okay, there.
They have to make that
So
planning commission.
That's,
Oh,
that's.
The whole meeting,
3.5 hours.
Real starting work done.
okay,
For pledge of allegiance, call the meeting to order, minutes, and then boom, get everything out and finish. At least enough to get it. That.
sounds like a plan. All right,
Big meet.
all right. Sounds good. All right. All right. Do we have any commission? Oh, are we ready to move on? Commission comments? None? Public? Items for the next agenda? We're gonna go through the ordinance.
All we're doing.
It's all we're doing.
We may be able to classify that as a work session.
We're not even gonna take the consideration of any public comment or any outside agency.
The work session.
All right, so can we classify it as that and then? So do you guys have a meeting or do you have a room that where you can work on a laptop and it projects where everybody can see your, because in here, we can't see that from here.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so if
One
we,
of our meeting rooms upstairs.
all right, can we meet up there instead of here so that we can do, because I think if as we're going along, it's a lot easier for everybody to be looking at it at the same
Let
time.
me ask you a question, since something on meeting. Are we legally allowed to move that meeting up instead of waiting a month?
I don't see why not. We can check and make sure I check with all of,
Yeah.
Mr. Neese.
Yeah, I mean, if we can, we move it up.
And if we can, and you all agree on a certain date. Sure that we can,
Okay,
I don't think that this
Doesn't really matter,
particular Thursday is, hard and fast. Especially if it's a work session for you folks to come
Right.
together.
If it's a work session and they're not in here because every
Right.
other Thursday this room is occupied.
Right, right.
okay. Right,
And it's gonna be advertised, public's allowed to come do a work session. Application.
unless 3111 comes back with their stuff.
There's no way, there's no way. On vacation, that guy's never gonna have that money, right? We'll see him.
I don't think so either.
We'll see him
Okay.
February 15th.
All right, okay, that sounds good. All right. All right, sounds good. All right,
So we're gonna pick a date other than the last week of October. Is that what we're doing?
But that would be our regular schedule.
As a regular schedule, our work session is gonna be
We're
prior.
just having a work session, we don't need folks, we're just gonna be working upstairs, we just need to put the switchboards.
Okay,
so,
we just need to pick a date.
yeah, do you guys have
Look at the date.
any constraints?
I gotta get in front of my wife for that one.
Okay,
Yeah.
Because at 2 weeks, I can't, it couldn't be before.
okay,
You wanna do,
Still do the same meeting. You wanted to, and just.
We have 2.5 hours at
Well,
minimum,
I-
right? We met at 4.
Well, no, I mean, you could do it upstairs and just say there's no. Because it was supposed to be every other month when we first started anyway. So you could just skip a month and say. There's no Shade Tree Commission meeting next month. And just had the meet.
No, but I think what we're concerned with is proper advertising for the sunshine law. To comply with that.
I mean, Mr.
So we
Burr-
just need we need to know a date when you're going to have this work session. It won't be in this room, so I don't think we'll have to worry about anything like that. So I think we just need a specific date sometime after the 12th.
You guys do the 17th? Do the 17th?
for 2
Plenty of
weeks,
time.
plenty of time.
17th?
yes,
I'll work till 10. Works till 9 at night.
At least.
You really don't want those tree hanging stands, do you? I'll cut them from far away.
I should be able to. 17th, I'll check.
So at what time do you think?
I'll be here for,
4? All right, so I could still be on,
I will donate dinner.
okay.
No,
Maybe I'll-
I will get dinner.
Okay.
Awesome. I'll make sure that there's no one meeting up in. the
Right,
room as
yeah,
well.
I mean,
Make sure
we're
that's
gonna set that date and time. We'll
Okay.
confirm it
Yep.
after speaking with Mr. Neese and Suzanne regarding the room availability and things like. Because who knows, I don't know if somebody offered that room. We have a couple, but we'll check it out. We'll confirm with everybody
Okay.
through an email that that's the date and time. And if it is, then we'll get it advertised.
Okay,
No, you don't have to be, I'm gonna hold you up, I mean. 4 to 5.
Yeah, I mean, if you needed me, I could, yeah.
Nothing more.
Good.
With your
Obviously,
plan.
earlier
We're
the
messing
better.
up your plan, so we can move this along.
okay, that sounds good. All right. Okay, all right, Yep.
If not, then we'll keep it for our regular.
okay, that sounds good. All righty,
All right, good.
all right. Meeting adjourned.